Hey guys, what's up? So I signed up for the IG Builders Challenge on Instagram. Challenge starts now and I have about 3 weeks to complete this build. And basically what the challenge is, they give you a set of plans. This time around it's a coffee table, and basically you have to adapt the plans and kind of put your own style and your own spin on it. So I've come up with some new plans for a coffee table that I'll make available for download if you want to check that in the link below. So here we go, we're going to build a simple coffee table today, kind of with an industrial design. So let's get to it. I started by making the tabletop first and the legs second. I used all 1x6s for the top. I needed to cut down 8 pieces to the exact same size to make the top and bottom panels, so I set up a makeshift sacrificial fence and a stop block, as you can see here. This way I could make consistent cuts. It's not a perfect setup, but it worked out really well. I wanted to use 1x5s for the sides of the tabletop, but they didn't have any at the lumber store, so I just trimmed down some 1x6s. I'm going to use pocket screws to assemble the panels, so here I'm making the pocket holes in each of the boards. So here I'm just laying out my clamps and doing a dry fit before I assemble the panel. I'm actually using both glue and pocket screws. Here I'm applying a good amount of glue and spreading it out with my glue brush. You don't need to use pocket screws, but I find them helpful to pull the boards together tight, and it also saves some time because you don't have to wait for the glue to dry before unclamping. With the boards clamped together, I added the pocket screws in the pre-drilled holes, and I made sure not to over-tighten the clamps because 1x6s will easily bow with too much force. I also made sure to clean up any squeeze out before the glue dried. Here I'm making more pocket holes on the short edge of the panels so I can assemble the tabletop box. But before assembly I sanded down both the panels because I wouldn't be able to fit my sander once the box was assembled. To assemble the box, I laid my top upside down and used some clamps to hold it together while I assembled it with glue and pocket screws. If you don't have long clamps, you may want to ask a helper to push the boards together while you drive in the screws. I then did the same for the second panel, but just used screws for this. I skipped the glue. And in case you're wondering, I added spacer blocks underneath to help hold the panel up into place. Once I flipped it over, there were some small gaps, so I mixed up some glue and some sawdust to fill them in. And then simply sanded it all down to make it nice and smooth. And that's your tabletop. Before applying finish, I vacuumed up all the sawdust and wiped it down. Because I'm working with pine, I first applied some wood conditioner and waited 30 minutes, then applied some espresso colored stain and let it dry. As a top coat, I used a matte oil based polyurethane and applied 3 coats. I usually use a paintbrush, but I really like the finish I got with this foam applicator. And FYI, I only used poly on the top. For the rest of the table, I just rubbed it with Danish oil. Next I moved on to the legs. Here I'm using a stop block to cut my 2x4s to length. You can find the detailed measurements and the plans available on my website, and you'll find the link in the description below. I wanted to square up the rounded edges on my 2x4s, so I shaved off the edges. I started by ripping down one edge, then set my fence to 3 inches and did the other edge. Now a lot of the cuts need to be made at 45 degrees, so here's a little tip I picked up along the way. You add 3.5 inches to the length you want, then I laid out a measure tape and lined it up with the zero clearance in my sacrificial fence and used that to set up a stop block. I made sure the stop block was square to the fence and then just made all of my cuts. And it worked out really great. Here I'm trying to square up some 2x4s after I cut the miter, which really wasn't a good idea. You want to do the miter cuts after you square up the boards. After I finished making all my cuts, I did a dry fit and was happy to see that everything fit perfectly. The glue up was a bit complicated, to say the least. I'm beginning to wonder why I didn't just use 4x4s and make half lap joints. But anyways, I'm here now, so here's what I did. I decided to glue only 1/2 of each leg at a time. You can see me apply glue to the 2 outside pieces, but not the perpendicular one in the middle. I used some smaller clamps to help align the stacks vertically, and used some larger clamps to clamp it down to my workbench. I kept checking everything to make sure it was square and it was aligned. I let it dry, and after about 30 minutes I came back, flipped it over, and repeated the whole process over again, this time adding glue to that middle section as well. It was a bit tedious, to tell the truth, but the legs turned out great, so I'm pretty happy about that. Alright, I also added some pocket holes at the top of the legs to be able to connect them to the tabletop later. Finishing was again wood filler, sanding, wipe it down, wood conditioner, and stain. And to finish, a light coat of Danish oil. I almost forgot to make the hole to allow for the black iron pipe I'll be using. I really should have done this before applying the finish. The black pipes are really grimy, so I cleaned them off using some acetone. And to prevent rust, you can then wipe them down with some mineral oil. Assembly was pretty straightforward. Connect the caps to the nipples, and then add the couplings to each end of the pipe. Then I simply screwed the pieces together by hand until everything was nice and tight. FYI, I had the pipe cut to length and threaded at a local hardware store, but they also sell standard lengths and all the fittings at most big box stores. All that's left is to put the base into place and attach it to the table using pocket screws. Hey, I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to check out the description below where you'll find links for the detailed plans and all the products that I use for this build. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, I hope you do. Thanks for watching. See you soon.